Listen, I'm all here for the girl power, but there's kind of a pattern with the cases I'm covering on this channel, and I don't like it. But I somehow like covering female cases. Yeah, female killers are just a different breed, you could say. Great controversial statements to begin with. If you are lost desperately searching for last meals on the internet, welcome. This is the right channel, because me, your homegirl, on Fridays I sit down my fat ass, and I don't have like any other skills. I can't like do makeup and tell you stories about true crime. I can't like crochet and tell you stories about true crime. What I can do though is eat. Mostly junk food, because that's mostly what these losers choose. So I sit my ass down, I eat somebody's last meal, and that somebody just happens to have done a bad deed that landed them in prison, usually on a death row, and then they make a really bad last choice, which is usually they resort to junk food as their last meal. I don't just eat their last meal, I also tell you a story about their life and their bad deeds and how they landed themselves on that death row. It's good fun. I didn't see it made on the internet, so I was like, hey, I don't have skills, I might as well do this. Today, we're talking about Barbara Graham. Heard of her? You might have heard of her as Bloody Babs. Cool nickname to go through. You're like, wow, where is this going? What did she do? Oh, she blooded somebody. Maybe, or maybe she just had blood on her hands, but she didn't do it. Yet again, when it's a female and a crime case, it's always controversial, especially if it's sort of in the 50s, 60s, like this one. They're like, I mean, it's a female. Female were supposed to be housewives. Why would she do this? Maybe she just was in the wrong place at the wrong time. People are like justice for females, which yes, I get. But then you'll have to let me know what you think when you hear this case. Was Barb innocent? Was she guilty, and did she deserve what she got? Let's dive in. Just a sideline before I start, because I was rereading the first paragraph and I thought about this, and nobody really researches into this. When you get married and like take your husband's last name and stuff and then commit crimes under that name, why is there no research about like how, you know, the family or like the husband, like that extended family then feels about that? Do people consider that you're committing these crimes under that name and that's, you know, you're that new person now, so they don't return your maiden name when they speak about you, like, and they refer to you? Because I get it, you have technically changed your name, but still, there's just not enough research about the effects on the family and everybody involved. And it kind of disconnects you from your own family, so maybe your family isn't like as harmed or like as treated poorly on the basis of your actions. Wow, yeah, just a thought. So, Barbara Graham was born Barbara Ford on June 26, 1923. And she was born to a teenage unwed mother, which obviously we know is not going to be the most stable environment, but also there have been speculations, and by that I mean by me, whether that mother actually even wanted her. And that's based on Barbara's own interviews and Barbara's own statements of her relationship with her mother. So Barbara said she's never cared if I lived or died as long as I didn't bother her. So that kind of gives me the representation of her mother was just basically like, hey, you're here, you take care of yourself. And her mother, from time to time, obviously because this was old times, was sent to reform school because people were like, well, you can't really take care of your child, so we're going to send Barbara to her extended relatives and we're going to send you to reform school. You know, you chill out there for like a year or two, like, let's see if that rehabilitates you. And obviously she would come back out, Barbara would be like a different person, and her mom still wouldn't really care much about her. In 1936, at the age of only 13, she already ran out of home. And in 37, people have caught her because the word on the street was that, well, Barbara was kind of promiscuous already, so only at the age of 14. She was already known as a seagull. So a seagull was a term for women and girls who hung around the Navy yards of Oakland, Long Beach, and San Diego. So seagulls were particularly related to the beach areas. And they were called seagulls because they would meet sailors who were there on a shore leave. And one other term that nobody needed was the B-girl, and that's the girl at a bar that was illegally soliciting drinks. Again, a lot of times because she was still minor. So we left Barbara running away from home, and the police finally caught up to her, and in 37 they actually put her in a convent. They kind of classified her as a runaway, as a wayward girl, as somebody promiscuous, so they were like, okay, cool, chill sometime in the convent, I do good by you. And then in July 1937, they put her in this Ventura school for girls, which was the same reform school where her mother attended years ago. But there, the people working at the Ventura school for girls complained about Barbara's attitude. She obviously didn't have any intention of changing, so they would like write her up for smirking, or for strutting around. God forbid, she's moving around, she's having an attitude. So they really didn't, it didn't seem from what I was reading that they really invested in rehabilitating her as much as she resisted it. So obviously with that combination, it's not leading anywhere good. In 1939, they kind of finally release her or give up on her, whichever way you want to see it, and she goes back to her seagull business, so she goes back to the shore to chase a prospective husband. And she succeeds to do that and marries Henry Kilhammer, who was the member of the Coast Guard. Obviously everything goes speedy with Barbara, and by 42 she already had 2 sons. But the relationship obviously wasn't going well, so she separates from Henry and he actually gets the custody of the children. And for the next several years, Barbara is actually going to get married 2 other times, get divorced 2 other times. She's going to continue her work as a sex worker. She actually moved on to work in a brothel herself at the age of only 22. And she got involved into everything that life had to offer, obviously everything bad, including drugs and gambling. And she wasn't a stranger to prison life herself either. She served in prison for about 5 years for perjury because she was providing the wrong alibi to 2 of her friends. And after a prison sentence, she gets out of prison and she kind of thinks like, let's start a new life. Let me move away from this, because here everybody knows me by now. I mean, she has lived a more tumultuous life by the age of 22 than most people I know. Some weirdos. It's like, and I went to uni with some weird people. And at the time she leaves the prison, she moves to Nevada and gets a job as a waitress. So she's working as a waitress and realizes it's not enough to support the lifestyle that she used to have by, working on the beach and technically at a brothel. So she still does that on the side. There's reports that she even worked as a nurse, so she worked like odd jobs here and there just trying to get by. And as she's waitressing that bar, Henry Graham walks in and he gets super interested into Barbara. Like he kind of could spot like the experience. He could spot that, well, she would be a great partner, and not in a good loving wife kind of way, but more in like nefarious activities kind of way. So they get married pretty soon again, as they met in 1953. Barbara actually had a third child with Henry Graham that was named Tommy. And Tommy was only 2 years old when we get to this part, which is just super sad. So as soon as they got married, she was pregnant, everything, he immediately started including her here and there into his crook ways, into his criminal activities. And she soon met 2 of his partners, Jack Santo and Emmett Perkins. And soon enough, Barbara actually got, well, a bit more close to Perkins than she did to the other one. And they started having an affair. So on one such occasion, Perkins kind of introduces Barbara to this idea. He's like, well, listen, I know a widow, don't ask me how I know her, again, totally just loyal to you, Barbs. I know a widow, and like, she is really rich. Like, it could be one job, and it could be one really great job, and we'll get out with at least like $15,000. Like, be sick, just one robbery, 3 of us, we get out. She's old, she'd be a really easy target for all of us. And Barbara was gullible and liked this guy, so she kind of introduced that to the group. And I think it was Barbara that introduced this. Like, the sources don't state clearly whether it was Perkins or Barbara, but I think it was, he saw the entry point through her, because he knew that Henry, her husband, is gonna listen more if like his wife introduces this as an easy hit rather than him, because that would be kind of suspicious. So truly, I think this actually came from Barbara, although the sources don't state clearly. So in March 1953, they decide they're gonna realize this plan, but they make their first mistake, which is to include 2 other people, which is just, why did you need 2 other people anyways? It's already 3 against 1. But hey, listen, they didn't make best decisions throughout their whole life. They get 2 other associates, John True and Baxter Shorter, to join in this robbery. So now all 5 of them, because they're cowards, go to this widow Mabel Monaghan's house. All of them are hiding on the side, and Barbara is there like knocking at the door, giving some pretense sorry and asking Mabel to use the phone. So Mabel, being the good woman that she is, lets her in, and immediately all 4 of the others jump her in and try to threaten Mabel. All of them are pointing guns at Mabel, but Mabel isn't telling them where her jewels are. She's like, no, you'll have to kill me, I ain't telling you anything. From their statements afterwards, which again might or might not be true, basically they all backed out and they were like, okay, cool. She's not telling us anything, it's fine, let's just run and leave this as it is. But Barbara actually took lead then and put Mabel to the side and took a pistol and started pistol whipping her until Mabel was unconscious. And then when she strangled her with a pillow. Again, this will be debated afterwards, but after that they left the crime scene and they left with nothing. And it was later said that they actually missed out and Mabel stuck out to herself because she actually did have about 15,000 of jewels and cash in the house, but they were spooked, so they ran away from the crime scene. Now when the police comes to the scene, they find a 64-year-old Mabel tied, so her hands were tied behind her back. Her body was partially leaning out of the closet, so it seems like she might have attempted to hide her. She looked significantly beaten up. The blood was splattered all over the scene, so they knew that this was a violent crime. While they're processing the scene, they realized that they didn't go into her purse, which had about like $500 in itself, but that they have tried like removing the carpeting, basically ransacking the place in order to find the money, and they didn't care about like the fingerprints or anything that they were leaving behind. Because the scene was so bloody, they immediately thought this was actually linked to like a more serious criminal, so like something to do with either gambling or drugs, so they looked into the gambling underworld. But luckily, Monaghan's daughter actually offered a reward, so she immediately put up the reward of $5,000 for anybody giving any information leading to an arrest or like leading to them finding the culprit. And soon enough, one of those extras that they have added to their lovely group, Baxter Shorter, came through because he was again a petty criminal, was like, hey, I'm an ex-convict, but they didn't say anything about ex-convicts not getting the reward. I'd love to claim some of this money. Baxter speaks and he tells them, listen, I don't have like their last names, but I can give you the first names of John, Emmett, and Jack. So those were the names, but also there was a woman. I didn't catch her name, but there was definitely a woman operating with them. And they're like, okay, cool. So they look at the radar, they look at like the connections to the crime world. And soon enough, obviously, they get to the names of John and Emmett, so John Santo and Emmett Perkins, who were involved in similar types of crime, including weapons, including violence. So they knew that they were on the right track. And sort of as the police was doing the investigation and interviewing John True, so they got to another one of their clan members, the Francisco Examiner newspaper actually leaked that the police has suspects in the investigation of the widow's murder. So the group or somebody, they never found out who did this, but got spooked and kidnapped Baxter Shorter, and since then nobody has seen him. Which again makes us think like it is probably somebody from the group that had direct tie to him and would directly benefit from Baxter not speaking. But now they have John True and they're like, listen, you might as well meet the same destiny. You don't have a criminal record, and if you testify against everybody, we're gonna give you the immunity. True had no reason not to do it, and he snitched on everybody else in the group. John True's statement didn't vary, there was no hesitation. He said like he was the second to last to go in, it was only Baxter after him, and by the time he was in, Monaghan the widow was already pinned down to the floor, and Barbara Graham has already beaten her so severely, so the others were kind of like trying to pull her away, not to kill her. They tied her up, put a pillowcase around her head, and put her in the closet. But then he said like for 15-20 minutes they were ransacking the house, they didn't really find much, so they were about to leave, but then he noticed that Barbara wasn't in the room, and he kind of heard again the sounds of somebody being pistol whipped in another room, but he didn't pay much attention. They all left the house and went to this motel in El Monte to clean up. Because the newspapers were losing it over this case, police knew that they had to act fast because otherwise their informant is going to be the same destiny as another one of their clan members. And Barbara and Henry knew that they had to act fast, so they were moving. They moved from Ambassador Hotel, they moved to Sea Beach, then they moved to like Linwood Buildings. They were just moving to different premises, trying to sort of cover all their trails. However, there was a sting operation at that point, and the police was following them everywhere, which finally led to their arrest on May the 5th, 1953, when this undercover police officer finally arrested them while they were approaching their hiding location. In the trial, True testified against them, and Barbara was claiming her innocence from the get-go. And I think from like the interviews that she was given, obviously media was losing it over her, but as with other cases that I have mentioned, like the Lonely Hearts Killers and with Martha Beck, Obviously, with the cases of female criminals, the coverage was completely different. Nobody was caring what the males were wearing to court, but everybody was commenting on Barbara, on her weight, on what she was wearing, on how she was looking. And I think she, yes, disliked that, but also she kind of tried to play that to her advantage and try to, like, when she was giving interviews, focus more on justifying her sex work and seeing if maybe that drives away the focus on the actual crime here. She said, "Sure, I was a prostitute and a damn good one. Why do people make so much of sex anyways? It is part of our natural makeup, like getting hungry for food. If you want to eat, you go to a grocery store or restaurant. If you need sleep, you sleep. If you want sex, why not get it?" The media immediately named her Bloody Babs, and that was reported to have actually came out of the prosecutor's opening statement in trial. Immediately they wanted to portray her as somebody committing a men's crime. She was tagged in the media as the icy blonde, with phrases like icy calm and stony attached to descriptions of her behavior in court. These are just some titles from the newspapers. Two men and a blonde arrested. Barbara Graham flares up at trial. Composure of defendant near breaking in bitter exchange. Press besieges Barbara Graham. Monahan's case convicted slayer in drab jail attire sticks to story of innocence. So on one end she was portrayed as callous, as emotionless, but on the other end she's a female, so she's playing to her seductive side in court. And they were commenting on her behavior from start to finish, so like from what she was wearing, to how she would stare at her lacquered nails, to how many times she would yawn and stretch. Everything she did in court was heavily scrutinized. And not just scrutinized, but also dramatized. Like every single case where I covered the female these last meals, there's always something like this, where the media just dramatizes that they're trying to prolong the trial. So here they said like Barbara actually faked this fall down the stairs just before the jury was to like reach the verdict, and they were to have like their last hearing and the closing statements, and this is done because she wanted to prolong it. It's like every yawn of hers, like or every stretch, it's all because she wanted this trial to go on as long as possible. During her trial, Barbara also made a second big mistake. I mean, she made plenty, but it's definitely up there. And that mistake, if you watch any of like Christina Redlow's YouTube videos or just like any prison show out there really, because this is the part that, yes, should be correct. And that's not to tell people what you're in for, but also not to try to bribe people to give you the alibi. So she tried bribing Donna Prow, who was her cellmate, and she told her like, listen, if you give me the alibi, I'm gonna give you 25k. As soon as I get out of here, because obviously, you know, she gives her the alibi, she's gonna get released. However, Donna was working as the police informant. They immediately got Donna as soon as Barbara was coming in to try to actually do this, convince her, and she's like, yeah, listen, we're gonna cut down on your prison sentence, you just get her to confess what she's in for and to actually admit her guilt. And once they realized there was a bribe involved, she really stood no chance from that point on, because that was immediately presented as the evidence in court. Barbara only could resort to pleading desperation and trying to show herself off as desperate in two different ways. One was when this was presented, she actually asked the court, oh, have you ever been desperate? Do you know what it means not to know what to do? And then on the other side, her defense team was trying to show her as somebody who went along with this act out of desperation. She felt like it was her last option, it was her last resort. It was her husband's decision and like his colleague's decision. She had no other option. She was married to the man, like otherwise like she might as well be dead. So they bring her husband, Henry Graham, to the stand. They're like, okay, cool, what's your opinion on this? But Henry at that point was hardcore heroin addict, so his statements were all over the place and kind of contradictory. They just didn't work towards Barbara, really. So the jury only took 5 hours after all of this to bring the guilty verdict against all three defendants. So all three, Barbara, Santo and Perkins, got the death sentence, and Barbara was transferred to San Quentin, where women were waiting for the death row. And now we come to this part, because she kind of didn't have it like the very last minute, so what was Barbara Graham's last meal? Let's do it. Play the drum roll. Can you even insert the drum roll? It's like, are you even tech savvy enough to insert a drum roll? Probably not. Diabetes, yes, that's what she wanted for her last meal. This is chocolate milkshake, and then this is the hot fudge sundae. So the day before her execution, as you know, if you have listened to like my other last meals videos, Usually they transport you into like the wards. I forgot what the name was, but it's kind of like the execution center, you know, like you have the ward where, well, you kind of sleep overnight and they wake you up usually bright and early because usually they want to get rid of you, as bad as that sounds, as soon as possible in the morning and get it over with. So Barbara was transported in this, and while she was in this ward, this prison guard came and basically tried to get her to unwind as much as possible. And to do that, he asked people to like supply her with as many chocolate milkshakes as she wanted, and she just kept drinking them through the night, which again, not the best if you want to try to fall asleep, to drink so much sugar, but I guess it's her last day, so she doesn't really care. So early morning, June the 3rd, 1955, she wakes up, she's still drinking her freaking chocolate milkshakes, because at this point she doesn't care about her teeth, does she? And she orders hot fudge sundae as her breakfast. And people have said that she was nervous and she was kind of like chain smoking her Camel cigarettes, because again, it's different times, you could smoke in prison. And they were like, yeah, sure, that can count as your last meal. She kept repeating, I can't believe that I'm gonna be executed in 4 hours, I can't believe it, I can't believe it. And this matron was kind of trying to be optimistic and tell her, maybe you will get a stay of execution, you know, maybe the appeal will work, this last appeal that you had will work, and you won't be executed. And Barbara at that point kind of just accepted her destiny. She said, like, I never had a break in my life, so it will definitely not happen this time. Not a chance, lady, not a chance in hell. And honestly, in my view, this would be such a mistake. I'm always early to places, so like, if my execution, God forbid, God forbid, God forbid, I would be pissed as well if my execution was just to be postponed. So she was to be executed at 10 a.m. But then, because of the appeal, they prolonged it, so it was 10:43, and she was in her beige woolen suit, because apparently this is how they were executing them back then. So she was in this beige woolen suit, and she was just like frustrated, because she's like, I waited for 43 minutes, she's like, what is happening, am I getting executed or not, somebody tell me. And then at 10:43 they were like, well, we are still making decisions, so the stay of execution is still granted, we're postponing it until 11:30, and she was fuming. And finally, at 11:28, they got to her and she said, like, why do you torture me? I was ready to go at 10 o'clock. She was also high on sugar. You can really feel, like, what the food that they eat does to their minds. Even just, like, with this bit of a sugar fit, like, I'm already feeling all the emotions. I'm already like, why are you pissing me off? Like, why were you late? But yeah, sorry, Barbara, you don't make the rules. I don't really feel sorry for her. It's just, like, bad choices if you don't want to get upset by something that already upsets you. So many mistakes. So many mistakes. Let's see what this tastes like while I tell you the rest of that story. They put a decent brownie in here. So at 11:28 a.m. they are bringing her to the gas chamber. Yes, because it was still gas chamber time. By the way, gas chambers are still used in certain states, which I just find to be ridiculous, because this is like 50s. You're like, okay, cool. Still, there's a movie about this, and the way that they portrayed it is just so dramatic and so eerie. And she requested to be put the blindfold so that she doesn't look at the observers, because obviously journalists, everybody can still come and observe, and nobody that she cares about would be there. Her last words were, good people are always so sure they're right. These people that brought her in, these police guards, advised her, like, take a deep breath before the cyanide droplets actually get to you, like it will be easier and it will be quicker. To which she says, how would you know, you little rascal? Which, I mean, funny, but how do you know? Like, you haven't gone through it, have you? So they shut her in and they released the gas. It was portrayed, apparently, in the movie as well, correctly. She kind of like flung her head backwards and kept it there all the way until she lost consciousness, when her head kind of dropped forwards. And some 30 officials were observing it from the observers area, mostly reporters, but also like 20 police guards. They just wanted to make sure that this is correct. And they have actually given statements later saying that her death was a lot easier and a lot less painful than the death that she put Mabel Monaghan through. And I just find it so ironic. I don't love it when it happens, but karma is gonna get you, and it's usually gonna get you in like a very similar way, in a very eye for an eye way, because Mabel was strangled and she died in a gas chamber. You know, was the punishment just? It was just a bit on the nose. As Los Angeles Times described this, the brashly attractive 32-year-old convicted murderess, her bleached blonde hair turned to its natural brown, walked to her death as if dressed for a shopping trip. The San Francisco Chronicle, the mask hid her tired eyes and she looked pretty in her beige suit. I'm glad the journalists have their priorities straight in this case. So wow, you're wondering what are we still doing here? It's a done deal. She's dead. Like nobody has any doubt in their mind. Well, a lot of people did. When it comes to cases like this, where it's one person's testimony, when there's not like they're not really convicting her based on so much evidence rather than witness statements, people are going to start throwing controversial statements and trying to say, especially for a case where somebody has been executed in 1955, with the further laws coming along, people are going to question whether that person should have actually been executed in the first place. And also, how can we use that to now change the laws and eradicate the death penalty? So, Governor Brown in 1960s wanted to abolish the death penalty. However, the district attorney Levy at the time said that no, we should not pass this bill because if you're looking at Barbara Graham's case, for example, he dropped a bombshell that Barbara actually confessed in a private conversation with the police officer Teets at the time. Because at that point, what you need to remember, Miranda rights weren't a thing. Miranda rights weren't a thing until mid-1960s. So yes, if we are moving away from the laws and we are like trying to say like no, they need to understand that they have the right to lawyer, they have the right to remain silent, that the police can't have these confessions and they will be inadmissible if they're taken privately, at that time this wasn't an offense. So whether Barbara confessed privately or during a conversation that they were making notes, still doesn't matter, she has confessed to it. So we shouldn't be passing this bill. And he actually managed to convince people and the bill to abolish death penalty wasn't passed on them. The reporters for San Francisco Chronicle and San Francisco Examiner have also debated and have published stories where they kind of question the guilt, which I just find like, wow, what a change of mind after you literally reported only on her looks for about like years, all the way up until she was executed. It's like, could have reported on this before if you really believed it, but sure. So they reported like, because of her figure, because she was slender, she couldn't have done it. She was present at the scene of the crime, but nobody really gave details into what Barbara has done. Also, when True gave that first statement, he didn't state that he went and checked and was definitely sure that it was Barbara who pistol whipped the widow. Also, he wasn't sure because he was the second to last to walk into that house. He wasn't sure that it was also Barbara who pistol whipped her to begin with. It could have been any of the other few men that have walked in before him. And their cellmate, Montgomery, who was Perkins' cellmate, so one of the clan members' cellmate, also testified after this that actually Perkins told him, we only choose Barbara to go on the stand and like represent us because we thought like people are gonna see her as a woman but also as a mother of 3 kids, so they're gonna be lenient on her and therefore they're gonna be lenient on all of us, and that kind of backfired and we just made a mistake. And although that bill failed to pass, a lot of people still believe that females are not capable of conducting such violent acts like it was done in this case. And as we keep seeing again and again, women are treated more leniently in court because of this, and that was their whole strategy to begin with. You'll have to let me know, do you think there was enough evidence to actually make them send Barbara Graham to the gas chamber? As you know, I'm not like pro death penalty in every single case. When it comes to somebody like Timothy McVeigh, sure. Not saying that this crime is not bad, but because it was conducted back in the day when, well, they didn't read her Miranda rights, but also because from anything that I have read, I know the science wasn't up to date, so hell knows if they were actually collecting like any samples of like hair, blood, DNA on the scene. That definitely today would be done, and that would most definitely determine who was the person that was actually bludgeoning them, like whose DNA was mostly present on the scene, for us to determine this. But at the same time, I'm not convinced that just because she was a female, she wasn't capable of doing this. And I kind of do feel like in a lot of these cases, I don't know, the Fred and Rose West, which I haven't covered yet, Myra Hindley, for example, like in a lot of these cases that you hear about, females do instigate these crimes. And then they try to manipulate the press, manipulate the court into seeing them as the more vulnerable party. And they know that in certain cases it will work. And in this case, again, it could have worked. She was just smarter. I think like genuinely, had she not bribed the cellmate, this might have actually worked for her. Like, she might have actually gotten away scot-free. But you drop down in the comments what you think about this case, also what you want me to eat next, what you want to cover next. Hopefully somebody that just hasn't eaten like 4,000 calories in sugar. And this case inspired a 1958 movie I Want to Live, where Barbara was portrayed by Susan Hayward. And Hayward actually won the Academy Award for the Best Actress. In this movie, I only watched the trailer, so I can't like really recommend it, and even just from this trailer. I think the trailer was just her in the gas chamber dying, and I was like, wow, okay, this is something. It's like half of the trailer is just her swinging her head in the gas chamber. I was like, okay, I mean, I guess this does get some audience. I'm not sure about that portrayal. That just stayed vivid in my imagination. I was like, okay, cool, you portrayed it nicely for me to actually describe it, how she died, so that's there for you if you want to watch, if you want an even more glamorized version of this case. Barbara was the third person to be executed in California in this century, and only one of 9 prisoners to be executed in the gas chamber in 1955, and the other 2 were part of her criminal group. And I just wanted to end on this note because I want you to know that Barbara didn't want to serve her life in prison. She actually wanted to die. She said herself, if I have to spend the rest of my life in prison, if I have to serve more than 7 years, I want it the way it is. I'll take the gas chamber. Maybe that will be better for my kids. And she said that this is what she gets for paying for her little sins. So that's that on the case of Barbara Graham or Bloody Babs, and you'll have to let me know what you think about it. Was it deserving? Even if we didn't have as much evidence as we would have today, even if she had confessed on the sly, even due to the way that people have portrayed her and the fact that maybe even that witness statement wasn't just strong enough. In the meantime, keep appreciating your healthy meals, your really like nice and healthy meals, as if they were your last. See you on Friday. Happy Friday. Happy Friday.